And according to the Torah, someone born out of an adulterous relationship can't marry in a regular Jewish ceremony, but can only marry another Nazi. In the Middle Ages, they clearly had a problem with this law. I want to know what she thinks of it. And so what they did in the Middle Ages was to say that no one can ever testify that someone is a Nazi. Even if you know the circumstances. I know that this kid was born out of an adulterous relationship. No one is allowed to come to the rabbi to say, I know this is. The rabbi is not allowed to hear that testimony. So I would say the same thing about conversion today. No one is permitted to ask what went on in the conversion ceremony. Was this a good conversion or not a good conversion? No one is permitted to testify, you know, so-and-so wasn't converted properly. But all conversions ought to be received by the Jewish community as valid, and all people who are, and no one who has been converted ought to be questioned about the validity of their conversion. And in that way, in both ways, that is both in keeping matrilineal descent, you're born to a Jewish mother, you're Jewish, you converted, you're Jewish, we keep a very clear standard of who is Jewish and who isn't. Thank you.
So I promised you my journey, my story. I grew up in New Jersey. My mother grew up in New Jersey in an Orthodox family, and my father grew up in Baltimore. If any of you have seen the movie Avalon, that was, I mean, it wasn't like exactly my father's family, but that was my father's family.
Cut the turkey. My father's.
It was your father's family? So my grandparents in Baltimore were Buddhists. They weren't allowing any religion in the door, and they weren't allowing my father to go explore anything about religion. They were by conviction secular Jews. So here's this intermarriage that happens in November of 1941 between a secular guy and an Orthodox young woman, and they decided to kind of meet in the middle at Reform. And that was how I managed to grow up in the Reform movement, where I was very happy, and I was the dorky religious school kid who actually liked religious school, and would read the stuff, and would come with my homework and all those things that I'm sure nobody else in the class.
All of our kids.
All of your kids for sure, because it's not dorky anymore. But back in the day, it was not very cool. So that was how I grew up, and I was very active in JFT, which is the Jersey Federation for Temple Youth, which is the New Jersey region of the National Federation. There's all kinds of SIFTs and WIFTs and WAFTs and wherever you are. So I was the state song leader. Which meant that I would take my guitar and go around to different congregations around the state and sing and stuff like that. It was very fun. And I got a job when I was 16 as the music teacher in another Reform temple in our area in New Jersey. So I'm teaching in one Reform temple, and I'm going to Hebrew High School in my Reform temple where I grew up. And I asked my rabbi in my temple a question. I don't remember the question, but his answer to me was, and this was in the late 60s, so you have to kind of place it in context too, when I was in high school. So he thought, I'm sure he thought this was a perfect answer for a Jewish teenager, back in the day there. And his answer was basically, Judaism is whatever speaks to you. You pick what you like to do, and what doesn't speak to you, you don't have to do, and it's kind of all there, and you figure out for yourself, what is meaningful to you, which is, one sort of expression of the Reform movement's commitment to personal autonomy, which basically does boil down to, if you think this is going to further your Jewish identity and your community's Jewish identity, then that's what you pursue. So this was his answer, and I have to admit that I walked out of there kind of scratching my head, saying, really? Like, people were killed in the Holocaust for pick what you want, and if you don't have to do, you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, and it just didn't seem to sit with other things that I had learned about Jewish experience and Jewish history. At which point I went to my job teaching in the Reform Temple, in the other Reform Temple, where the education director was a frustrated conservative rabbi who JTS had turned down because he had been a gym teacher. And they figured he didn't have the intellectual chops to make it JTS. Where there was not a good call on JTS's part. But he understood the construct that we talk about in the conservative world. And when I told him this story, his response to me was to explain to me about halakha, about Jewish law, and about brit, covenant, and what the dynamics of that are, and what minhag is, what custom is. And that just seemed to make a whole lot more sense. And it took me another while until I was really able to put that together with conservative synagogues and JTS and the conservative movement. So for me, the glue of the Jewish world is halakha. The glue of the Jewish world is brit, it's covenant. It's our deal with God. God says, I'm going to be your God, I'm there for you, I'm giving you this Torah, we're in this for the long haul, and our response is, we will do these mitzvot, we will study Torah, we will do these mitzvot, we will keep our part of the deal, and you, God, will keep your part of the deal, and we are in this for the long term. So that sense of that dynamic, that ongoing dynamic, is to me the foundation of every question that we address in the Jewish world. So then the question doesn't become what speaks to me personally and what works for me as an individual. It's what is going to contribute to our maintaining this brit and transmitting this brit to the next generation. That's what the big question is when we come to the specific questions. And that is to me the question in the back of my mind as I sit in the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards and think about what response I may be researching and writing as time goes on. I promised Rabbi Lewis that I would talk about on the ground what happens in conservative synagogues, and I think I better speed up a little bit because 3 minutes. Okay, no problem. The approach that I have used dealing with the interfaith families in my American congregations, because I have to admit in my Israeli congregations I never had that issue, was to say, first of all, I have an intense and deep and profound respect for every non-Jewish spouse who supports the Jewish identity of his or her spouse or mate or partner. And I have a profound and deep respect for every non-Jewish parent who is willing to support and contribute to and nurture the Jewish identity of his or her children. So that's the first thing. Which leads me to the second thing, which is if this person, this non-Jewish parent, for example, let's say, remains not Jewish, I have to assume it's because he or she has a very good reason for remaining not Jewish. Those people, those non-Jewish spouses and parents must know that if they were to step forward and say, I want to convert, that they would be embraced with open arms. So if they are not doing it, it's my responsibility to respect whatever the reasons are that people are not converting. And therefore, it behooves me to not treat those people as Jewish, because they are deciding to not be Jewish. So that is kind of the guiding principle of how I then negotiate what happens on the ground in my congregations. So I have a simcha. I have this awesome family, two doctors. She's Jewish, he's not. Their daughters are become benot mitzvah, a couple of years apart. And this guy, the dad, the non-Jewish dad, is an awesome guy. And he is, he schleps the kids to day school. They were in day school, actually. He would pick them up from day school. He would do whatever he would do. He was there all the time and very actively supporting his wife and his daughter's Jewish identity. And what was I going to do with him at the bat mitzvahs? So my first experience of non-Jewish parent on the Bima was actually in Gainesville, and I was told by the leadership of the congregation, maybe you can fill this in for me, I never quite got it. They told me that non-Jews were not allowed on the Bima when the Torah was out of the Ark. Did they make that up between when you were there and I was there? That's awesome. That's really hysterical.
I never heard of that.
You never heard of that? Well, they told me. They told me that when the Torah was out of the Ark, non-Jews could not be on the Bima. And I was following this colleague of over 20 years, and
I can hear her say that.
Yes, and he knows who said it too. And so I decided not to touch it, right? I taught about it a couple of times, but I was, not there long enough to make big changes. So, but the thing that kind of amazed me about that is a non-Jew being in proximity to a Torah scroll does absolutely nothing to the Torah scroll. What did they think was going to happen here, right? So I never quite got it. And so I never had the heebie-jeebies about calling up a non-Jewish parent when the scroll was out of the Ark. On the other hand, I would not invite a non-Jewish parent to have an aliyah with the Jewish parent, because what do the brachot say, right? The brachot say, Asher bachar banu, asher natan lanu, sorry. You have chosen us for this Torah. You gave us this Torah. Well, the non-Jewish parent has chosen to not be part of that us. So what kind of position am I putting that person into by having that person stand there and say these words which do not reflect how that person feels? So we have the non-Jewish parent come up. We do all of these presentations and things, at the end, the sisterhood comes up and the men club comes up, and all these people come up, and the president and everybody, and then I have the family come up, and the family says Shechianu, and the non-Jewish parent and grandparents and everybody come up for that, and we do Birkat Kohanim, and we bless this lovely family, and we do all of that. And then the parents get a chance to say their piece, if they want to, and whichever parent or both parents want to, we do that. We have English readings that the non-Jewish grandparents can come up and read. There's a prayer for peace. Sometimes they pick their own poem. They come up with their own poem. I've heard some really lovely poetry in the last few years. So there are lots of different options for very meaningful participation in a bar or bat mitzvah or Shabbat Chatan V'Kala celebration that does not put the non-Jewish relatives in the equivocal position of being treated like Jews when they decide that they are not Jewish and don't want to pursue being Jewish. So that's, I guess, my time. And, certainly happy to answer questions.